picky eaters, and poetic meter. I discuss this and more on today's episode. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today it is Short Story Tuesday, so I wanted to focus on an interesting short story that I read, and one that I've read before, but it's also meant for children. It's always important to, read what's meant for children and see what we're trying to tell those children. And today's short story is all about, of course, picky eaters, poetic meter, and eating things in weird locations. I am referring to Green Eggs and Ham by Dr. Seuss, which was published in 1960. For those who don't know, Dr. Seuss, or Theodore Geisel, was an American author, known mostly for writing children's literature. He started in the early 1900s, writing a fair bit in mostly magazines here and there. And then around the 1960s, he started writing more specifically aimed at children. You see The Cat in the Hat, which I've talked about on this channel before, Green Eggs and Ham, One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, among many, many others. He was known for writing the stories in poetic meter, which he does in this one as well. And he also wrote propaganda during World War II. Unfortunately, he was, as I've said before on this channel, he was anti-Japanese at the time. He later realized the error of his ways in promoting the imprisonment of innocent people, but at the time, he pretty much endorsed what Roosevelt was doing in the Japanese internment, which isn't good. But yeah, we should hold those people accountable, even if they are dead and whatnot. But without further ado, let's talk about Green Eggs and Ham. I will read it, do a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So Green Eggs and Ham focuses on an unnamed man. We never seemingly find out what his name is throughout the story, but he encounters a strange, what appears to be a child, and I'm not really sure, just a diminutive, fluffy person thing. Dr. Seuss's art is always funny, but his name is Sam I Am, and he offers green eggs and ham to the unnamed man, and I promise you I'm not trying to rhyme here. But he offers him the food, and the man doesn't want it. Who can blame him? It is green after all. And so Sam just repeatedly offers him the food in increasingly bizarre locations. On a house, with a mouse, on a boat, on a train, in a tunnel, just in a variety of strange locations, and the unnamed man just keeps saying, "No, I don't want it, leave me alone." And finally, the man says, if I eat it, will you just leave me alone? Will you stop bothering me? And Sam I Am is like, yeah, sure, absolutely. And so he eats it, he likes it, and then he thanks Sam for giving him the food. And that's where the story ends there. In terms of analysis, this is a very short story aimed at children. So pretty short, much like most of the stuff that's aimed at young kids. But there's still quite a bit worth discussing here. One of the themes, or the main theme that Seuss is working with here, is that of pickiness. The unnamed man is picky and doesn't want to try new food. Can you think of another age group where people just don't want to try food even though they've never had it before? Children, exactly. If you might have said children out there. But so it's clear this is aimed at children. This is a message for children talking about picky eaters. And what's interesting is that Sam I Am asked the man how he knows that he won't like the green eggs and ham if he's never tried it before. Because you always have those children who are like, I don't want the broccoli, or I don't want this weird food. For me, it was like green beans and also peas, which I like peas now and green beans, but not a fan of them when I was a younger child. Let me know what foods you didn't like when you, in the comments below, especially when you were a young child. So yeah, like Sam is like, how do you know you won't like it? And he's like, I'm certain I wouldn't like it. But like the weird thing about that is that like if it's like green beans or something, that's fine. That's one thing. We know those are edible. But this is green eggs and ham. This food is colored a color that, normally eggs and ham aren't normally colored. So it's reasonable to be a picky eater in that situation, I would say. I know this is meant to be humorous and silly, but if a child told you I refuse to eat these green eggs and ham, like I would understand that because it's a color that indicates it might be poisoned or bad or something like that. So I don't know, like choosing to have it colored that way a little undermines Seuss's message a little bit. But as the ultimate message here is that Seuss suggests that trying new things is healthy. That you might think that something is gross, but try boldly taking that next step, going on a food adventure, it will probably make you feel better in the end. Now, of course, that message is fun and whatnot, but there's a lingering sort of after message there about peer pressure and giving into it. Because Sam I Am repeatedly asks the man, like, will you try this? Will you try this? Will you try this? Eventually, the man gives in. But you could argue the same thing about drugs or something else that you would offer children that maybe children shouldn't have. Again, I don't think Seuss is going that far, but that's an unintended side message that is worth considering, and maybe it's something you should address when you read this to children. Another interesting element of this story is poetic meter. It's written similar to other Seuss stories. The Cat in the Hat, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish, among many others. They're all kind of written in the same poetic meter. I believe it's called anapestic tetrameter. I don't really know if that's the exact name for it here, but I have read that that's a large part of what Seuss's stories are written in. And I do think that it gives each Seuss story, a flow and a fun rhythm, which if you're aiming this at children, that might make it a bit more fun for them to read and not feel so much like reading, and you can get them reading it at a young age, which is very important. And then for adults, it's still fun to read. Like for me, it's fun to read this kind of wacky, weird, poetic kind of story, as it is fun to read most Seuss stories, even as an adult. So I feel like that's important to acknowledge there. And then the final element of this story is that of repetition. Seuss repeats each suggested manner of eating food over and over after presenting a new method of eating food. He goes like, will you try it in a house by a mouse? Will you try it here or there? Will you try it anywhere? And then he expands that, but he incorporates those same elements in the retelling of that. So it's like, will you try it on a train? Will you try it on a house next to a mouse? Something. So he creates this sense of repetition throughout the story, creating a long and humorous list by the end of it. Again, making it fun for children to read, but also creating a sort of unordinary or like kind of weird manner of eating this already weird food. Like why is it are the green eggs and ham so good that you would want to eat them in these strange locations? Sam I Am certainly thinks so. So you're more curious about this food and whatnot. So I do like the repetition. It's something that even caught my eye when I was a young child. I was like, this is a very interesting way of telling the story. So definitely something worth talking about when you talk about green eggs and ham. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Green Eggs and Ham, a story I'm pretty sure I overanalyzed, but once again, it's always important to pick apart these stories that are meant for children so that we know what we're saying and whether or not those stories are particularly good, because they're even for children, like there's good and bad children's literature, stuff that you can see that someone tried and stuff that where you can see where people were like, I'm not going to try, I'm just going to make money off children or something like that. So good to reflect on these sorts of things. If you have any thoughts on green eggs and ham, let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear from you and discuss this if that's what you wanted to do. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe in case you're one of the few people who probably hasn't heard about Dr. Seuss or green eggs and ham, because this is pretty widespread. There's even a movie on Netflix that's sort of been an adaptation of those types of stories. But other than that, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and food related travels. Farewell.